Hello everybody, this is Richard with Janus Motorcycles. The engine on the Halcyon 450 is what we call a dry sump engine, which means that it's a little different from the Halcyon or any of our Phoenix or Griffin 250s. The 250s use what's called a wet sump engine, and all that means is that on a wet sump engine, all the oil is contained in the engine case. So there's a sump at the bottom and all your oil is in there. On a bike like the 450, which is based on the XR400, it's a dry sump engine, meaning that there's an external oil reservoir or oil tank where all the oil is stored. The benefits of a dry sump system are that you can typically store more oil, which in turn provides longer life of the oil and a longer service interval. So you have a little longer service interval on the 450 than you do on the 250 because it's a dry sump engine. A dry sump engine, however, does have a different process for checking and filling and changing your oil on your engine. So today we're going to go over how to check your oil level on the Halcyon 450. All right, so the first step, as we mentioned, in checking your oil level on your Janus 450 is going to be bringing the oil up to operating temperature, which means taking the bike for what we recommend a 10-mile ride. It is not sufficient or advisable to run the bike for 10 or 12 minutes at idling. It's an air-cooled bike. You can see really elevated exhaust valve temperatures doing that. The engine is designed when it's running to have air flowing over it. Also, putting the engine under load, like you do when you're riding it, is going to make sure that that oil is fully normalized at an operating temperature, which will allow you to correctly read the oil level. I can't make this clear enough. If the oil is not at operating temperature, you may not get an accurate oil reading. So it may read too low, and then you go to fill it up, and you'll have too much oil, and it'll overflow and cause problems. So it's really important to take the bike out on a ride. We recommend about a 10-mile ride, and the key here really is for us, if there's not a big puddle of oil under the bike when you go to ride it, that oil is all still in there. So go ahead on your ride, and when you come back, that's when you should be checking your oil. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb, is when you get back from a ride, that's the best time to check the oil. But today we're going through just an oil check, so we're going to go ahead on a 10-mile ride and on this beautiful Friday afternoon, and we'll come back and check the oil. At this point, the engine and the oil have reached operating temperature. We've just gotten back from a 10-mile ride, and we're going to go ahead and check the oil. Just to reiterate, at this point the oil has reached a point where we're going to get a consistent reading on the dipstick. Be aware that your filler cap might be a little hot. It's an aluminum tank, so sometimes using a rag can be helpful here. So we're going to pull that out, and I'm going to use another rag just to prevent any oil from dripping on the bike. And we're going to clean this dipstick off. And really, it's a good idea to really clean that off. The cleaner you get it, the easier it's going to be to read when you put it back in. So we're going to go ahead and put this back in again, and when we do, you're not going to screw it in. You're just going to rest it like firmly down. No, don't twist it, just put it in there. Then pull it back out again. And as you can see, our oil level is right at the high mark on this. And if you have trouble reading it the first time, sometimes a little oil can get on it as it's going down in the filler neck. If you have trouble, just keep trying, like wipe it off again until you get a good reading. And what you're looking for is these two machine marks. You have a high mark and a low mark. Really, anything in between those two is absolutely fine. And if you go a little over, that's fine too. You just don't want to be like an inch above it. And so we really recommend in between here. One really helpful thing that I've discovered through test riding all the bikes we've put out so far and topping up all the oil is that these marks are almost exactly 100 milliliters apart, as is the low mark down to the end of the dipstick. So if there is no oil showing on your dipstick, you can fill in increments of 200 milliliters, and you're guaranteed not to overfill. Once you've gotten above, if you see it on there, then I would go by a 100 milliliter increment. And if it's a little like here, and you put another 100 milliliters in, it's going to be essentially the distance of these apart. So I found that really helpful in not having to just do tiny little increments and be worried about overfilling it. You got about 100 milliliters there. 100 milliliters is not a lot of oil, so this is pretty sensitive. That's kind of why I say it's really just kind of keep it between the two is a good idea. If it gets down to the very bottom, it's not the end of the world. You're like a tiny bit low on oil. So that is your process for checking your oil. One thing I did forget to mention, and we've already done that since we brought the bike inside, is you want to wait, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes after you come back, because your oil is going to be, sloshing around, and maybe it could have a little bit of foam on the top of it. And just letting it settle down for about 5 minutes is a great idea. That said, the kind of other end of that, when your engine's hot, you want to perform the check when you get back within about a half an hour. So before the oil starts cooling off again. So that's those are your rules of thumb for checking the oil. A dry sump engine is a little more complicated, as we've just seen, than checking the oil on a wet sump engine, but it comes along with the benefit of longer service intervals and lower maintenance. So we hope that this is going to help you understand the process, and we'll also be putting out this in the handbook and offering update bulletins for all existing owners.